Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NDM Podcast, where we bring together notorious disruptive minds who represent the best business leaders within their respective industries. These guests will tell you about professional and personal insights and the latest industry trends. My name is Nick and Matt Falcone, and I'll be one of your hosts today, and I'm the CEO of NDM Hospitality and Rental Resorts. At NDM Hospitality, we provide management services in the spaces of long-term rental homes, apartments, retail, entertainment, and food and beverage. And our fastest growing business, Rental Resorts, is providing branding, management, and consulting services on how to develop and bring to life residential resorts all around the world. I'm joined here by my co-host, my partner, and my brother, also the COO of our companies, Matthew Falcone, and we're excited to kick this off and have a great show. Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're super excited to introduce you to our guests today. So starting with Casey Beal, we have the group president of BurgerFi, Savvy Sliders, Happy Pizza, and Fat Boy Pizza. And we're also joined by Sonny Ilyas, the CEO of Vail. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you guys doing?
Super happy to be here.
Awesome. So we want to jump in. Matt and I are obviously food and beverage guys as well. We all come from the industry. We joke all the time that you got to be a little bit crazy to be in this business. Long hours, lots of demand. What got you guys to want to be in this business? We'll start with you, Sonny.
I never wanted to be in this business.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, I never wanted to be in this business. You know, when I went to school, it was for pre-med, but I was always passionate about nutrition, and growing up in hospitality, working at restaurants, I saw a massive disconnect where I was like, no one was focusing on health. And I noticed that everyone in my peers, my family, everyone wanted to eat healthy, but there was constantly these, 4 reasons why they wouldn't. And it was, the accessibility, the price, the variety, and then a lot of people thought it lacked flavor. So I, decided, hey, I'm gonna, really, try to energize the restaurant industry and bring some fresh forward options.
That's awesome. And I thank you for that, because I like to eat, healthy and fresh, work out, all that stuff. And it's a great option. So I love what you guys are doing. We're going to talk more about your product and your company. But I want to bring it over to Casey. Same question to you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think many people in this industry fell into the industry. There's hospitality, restaurant tourism programs in college, but a lot of people that I see that are peers and colleagues of mine, that they didn't set out for this as a career path. In college, I played sports. I bartended when I could to make extra money to go out and meet girls. And by that, I finished college. I got a real job as a district sales manager for a Fortune 300 company, and quickly realized I was miserable. I was living in Dallas and I was lonely. I moved back to New Orleans, back into my parents' house. My mom started unpacking. I said, I'll be here for 2 weeks. Like, just stop. Like 2 months later, she's like, it's time to go. But essentially, I went back into the food and beverage industry, and that just evolved over time into something that I realized I had a passion for. Nick, as you alluded to, I think selfishly, people that do well in this business have this gene that enjoys changing the trajectory of somebody's day. And if you enjoy that, I think you can be successful in this industry. And that passion was just, rooted deep down inside. I finished school with a Bachelor of Science degree, and, and then it led into, here it is. I never use that ever again. And, and ultimately, it was kind of by mistake, and it just, happenstance turned into where I'm at today.
That's great. I have a similar parallel with my college degree. I graduated with social sciences, so definitely not doing anything in that field. I want to follow up on one point that you made. You started in corporate, more desk job, went into food and beverage. Tell our audience, what are the major differences, from each, dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, first of all, I think the people that are successful are humble, they're vulnerable, they're comfortable adapting to the people they work with. So those traits are applicable no matter where you are. I've made a career out of fixing dumb shit. Ultimately, I remember times walking into a kitchen and a guy's, this is a true story, flipping a fried egg for a burger with a fork. And I'm like, do you not have a spatula? He's like, no, man, I've been asking for one for 2 weeks. And I grab my phone and I order a spatula, and I'm like, got him something the next day. And he's like, man, you're the best manager we've ever had. And I'm like, all right, this is crazy. So similarly, with the corporate experience and what I do on a day-to-day basis versus in the 4 walls, I think it's really just being comfortable enough to ask questions, because if you try not to direct too much and you try to listen more, I think you're able to uncover all the things that need to be done, and it can make you very successful in either application.
It's amazing when you listen, the stuff that can come out of every team member in every angle. I'm just blown away by that.
Yeah.
that and the amount of, crazy things that we see in the restaurant industry. I mean, me and Sonny were just talking about it before, and I don't think there's anything that we haven't seen.
If you don't have a high stress threshold, this is not the industry for you.
So being that we're on that point, we got to say, what's the craziest? What's number one on that list of the crazy scenarios?
I mean, it's just, if you're talking, we were just talking about candidates, about people, in this industry. I think that, one of the best parts of this industry is that, when you find your team, your dynamic group that's really committed to the core vision of the brand, it's one of the best feelings ever. When you really have that team that's committed. But there's the restaurant industry and hospitality in general has a lot of individuals who also are not the best candidates either. And the turnover rate is very aggressive. And, sometimes it doesn't matter how good your concept is. If you don't have the right leaders in the building, it doesn't matter. Your business is never going to grow. The guest is never going to get a high quality experience. So for us, we're very focused on that. But yeah, we get burned with people all the time. I just told Matt, we hired an individual. He was excellent. Everything was perfect in the back of house, front of house, almost too good to be true.
Yeah.
And as soon as he got his first paycheck, we never saw him again.
Wow. Yeah.
And
usually it is too good to be true. When you think it is.
And we had a neighbor business, manager come by and said, "Hey, is that, fellow no longer here?" And he never showed up after he got paid. And she said he did the same thing to us.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, things like that happen. It's not every candidate that does that, but it's the restaurant industry. There's craziness in that.
Yep.
Before we go to asking Casey, I want to ask a follow-up on that. Are you doing anything to source the right candidates? Have you found any tricks to share with people? I'm kind of
we've used recruiters, we've used LinkedIn, we've used Indeed. At this point, it's a lottery. Yeah. That's the way I look at recruitment. It's recruitment is 365. Yeah. I don't care if I have a full stack management team, full stack team members. I tell everyone in the company, we are recruiting every single day.
Yep.
Because we're one person away, to really transform the company into a better company tomorrow. Yep. I firmly believe that. And I know that because I have individuals that work with us and they have made such a strong impact on my organization. So for me to not have a focus on recruitment is me not doing my job as a CEO.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I agree with that 100%. Casey, what about your craziest scenario you've ever seen?
I'm uncomfortable sharing any of them. So I grew up in the nightlife business and then transitioned into the entertainment and casino space. So the things I've seen are probably something we ought to have a beer and talk about. Yeah. But really, and I'll stay positive here, but to Sonny's point about the thick skin, I'll always say this phone never rings because it's something going well. Yeah. It is never, ever, ever, hey, I just want to let you know things are going smoothly. Yeah. It's always here's the 6 different problems you have. Yeah. So, it doesn't have a time limit on it. But coming full circle into an experience, I'll keep it positive. There was a gentleman that day one, he was a dishwasher that we hired. His name's Andre, and this is in New Orleans, and that also makes all of my stories a little bit crazier. I spent a lot of time in that city, and Andre, day one, he had an ex-girlfriend pull up to the business and went into the business and was yelling at him and screaming at him. Oh my gosh. And then he runs out after her, and she has a door locked. And he pulled something like a knife out of his pocket and starts hitting the window. All right. And the manager is telling me this guy's crazy. What's going on? Who'd you hire? I don't know. And, but lo and behold, the ex was having an episode. She was threatening to hurt his baby who was in the car. He actually changed windows on the side. He had a tool that was used to break a window while he was using to save his baby out of the car, right?
Oh my God. Amazing. That perspective can change.
Bingo. Yeah. So the manager's okay, this guy's gone. Casey's crazy. Then I sit down with the guy and you uncover that. And it was so fun for me to see him. He has a kid who plays college football now. Wow. And to see our ability to kind of invest in this human being, treat him and humanize him, provide him opportunities, provide him better cash flow. He went from dishwasher to cook to bar backing, and in industry, he's making probably $1,000 a week in cash and in a night sometimes. And and just unlocked the potential for this guy and allowed for his kid to go to college and play sports. And every time I see him, it's a long embrace. And but the other stories are probably more fun and interesting, but this one's a heartfelt story. Yeah,
that's a great story. And one thing that you mentioned is we are in the problem-solving business. It's not really the restaurant business. No matter what, there's always something that comes up that we have to be ready for. And I feel like that's the business that we're in. That's why all of us are pretty successful in that business. One thing I did want to do is I wanted to backtrack a little bit. Sonny and I, we've known each other for a while, since college, since FSU. And I find, his story intriguing, kind of how you started. You obviously started with pre-med.
Yeah.
Your whole family started off in, as pre-med and getting into, being doctors throughout their lives. How did, explain to our viewers how you got into food and beverage, a little bit more in depth, because like I said, I find your story very intriguing. How you started up at FSU.
I mean, it was a little crazy. I kept it a secret. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I was like, you don't go to, university and like not become something. You don't just create your own path, per se. And my entire life, I told my family I wanted to pursue medicine. And, for me, there was just a moment where I was 21. I saw that there was a rise in Tallahassee in these like healthy meal prep, businesses. And I happened to be in Chicago when I found out the news. I found out that one company had decided overnight to shut down operations. Wow. They shut down operations, and I personally knew they had I knew about 100 people that was on this program. And then I immediately, it doesn't take a rocket science to realize, there's a need in the market. Someone can fill this. This is money that's hanging out there. And I always thought in the back of my head, I could do this better. I could figure this out. I can do this better. Something about being in Chicago, at that time, like, if you've been downtown Chicago, it's a beautiful downtown, and it was super motivating for me, especially going from Tallahassee to downtown Chicago. So I was really inspired, and I was like, you know what, let me do some research on this. I think I can figure this out. Fast forward, I convinced a couple friends, hey, let's, try to start, a meal plan company. And then 4 weeks later, we convinced 20 people in our fraternity, like, hey, let me, prepay us. We'll cook for you, deliver the food fresh every single day.
That's awesome.
And
so no storefront yet.
No, I convinced a sports bar. It was AJ Sports Bar, and I convinced the owner. I was like, let me sublease this at night when you're not using it.
Yeah.
And they weren't doing, I don't think, too well at that point, and they could have used the extra revenue. So I negotiated with him, and I think it was like $1,000 a month back then. Like, wow. I wish you can get a kitchen space for that. Help out now. And I had the worst flat top, the worst ovens, the worst everything, because I was like, their equipment hadn't been swapped out in many years. But
just to pause you for 1 second, is that place still there, AJ's?
I don't think so.
Did the back bar thing eventually fall over?
No, they're taking it down.
They took it
that down
for like
rebuilt it into a new shop.
Okay. Yeah, for anyone that's been there, that place was insane. Like,
we have a bunch of Tallahassee guys, just for all of our viewers to know here. Other than Casey, he's an LSU guy.
Sorry to interrupt. I had to inquire on that.
No worries. But essentially, I had no interest to, being in food and beverage. I looked at it as like, hey, these are meal programs. This is nutrition. Like, I think I can really make an impact. And I was actually marketing against the restaurant industry. I was like, you don't have to go to a restaurant to eat healthy. And I was figuring out different ways to kind of market. But the reality is I was doing everything on the fly. I had zero clue what I was doing in terms of like business. I just wanted to solve a problem.
That's great.
And then 20 people turned to 40, 40 turned into 80, 80 turned into 120, and then to 500. So for me, overnight, it was kind of surreal. But when you go to that, massive amount of growth in a short amount of time, it challenges you in different ways, but that was my kind of journey, kind of getting, started into it. And then I did the meal plan business for 4 years. I call it like that was my real life MBA, like figuring out business. And before I started Vail the restaurant.
Yep. No, that's awesome.
And just to elaborate a little bit more, tell us, what is Vail today? Where did you get to at this point?
Yeah, so now we have 10 locations across Florida, scaling from Tallahassee down to Miami. We have locations in Jacksonville, Boca, Delray Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, Pinecrest, Miami, Brickell, Miami. And I I think we're one of the first companies to start in Tallahassee that successfully scaled the entire state of Florida. Having that, so that's a huge accomplishment, for us, and I'm proud of that. But but our eyes are set for more growth in Florida. We look at state of Florida as one of the, largest economies in the U.S., but it's also, I'm very biased. I think it's one of the fastest growing, and people here are more health conscious. And it's not just younger generations. It's not just Gen Z that everyone is saying. In our Delray Beach store, we have just as many, Gen X, customers as we do Gen Z.
Let's hear from our sponsor, Rental Resorts.
Today's traveler wants more than a hotel room. They want space, service, and experiences that feel effortless. Rental Resorts delivers all three, combining the comfort of a private home with the amenities of a world-class resort. It's a model that transforms second homes and residences into thriving hospitality assets. For owners and investors, rental provides turnkey management, global marketing, and a guest experience that builds loyalty and drives profitability. For destinations, it means longer stays, more spending, and guests who return year after year. From family reunions to luxury getaways, rental makes living life on vacation a reality. And that vision, backed by proven operations and powerful brand partnerships, is reshaping hospitality worldwide. Rental Resorts, where lifestyle meets performance.
Casey, from what we heard before, it sounds like you came from a very different path on how you got to where you are. Love to kind of hear a little bit more about the brand
progression. Yeah,
as well.
As I alluded to earlier, a lot of my life has been spent in New Orleans. And in 2005, the entire city was affected by Hurricane Katrina, or the entire region. Yeah. And I had a career path in the nightlife industry and was doing very well in that space. And then 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit. Wow. And my son was 7 years old at the time. And we became, my wife, my son, and myself became nomads. There was no place to go. We went to Houston, North Louisiana, where my wife's grandfather, who helped raise her, passed away during the evacuation process due to the stress. And then we ended up settling in a bayou region of Louisiana for about 75 days before we can get back home. Wow. And when I got back home, you said perspective. I had perspective when I got back. I realized my son, who was 7 at the time, I wasn't around very much. I was always working at night and just a completely different lifestyle. And that time, those 90 days that I thought was like one of the hardest times of my life, actually transformed that relationship I have with my son, who's 27 years old today. He's my best friend. He comes over all the time. I feel like I'm about to get emotional talking about it. And but I mean, what happened to get me where I am is, at that time, I didn't get back into the nightlife business. It would have been too hard. The place was looted and burnt, and we had to do like all these super late night things with different events. And my dad came over, who's an artist, and there was no production anywhere. Businesses were closed. Homes were destroyed, and I had a bunch of people that I worked with that were friends and family that didn't have jobs. And my dad comes over, and we had some plywood in the garage. We hand painted some signs. I had a buddy of mine that had a large development company. Wow. We used his license and insurance, and we literally hand painted signs around the city of New Orleans that said we would gut your house. And we'd go in there, and it was like me, my dad, and my brother at first, and then there was like some barbacks and some other guys. And next thing you know, I had crews of people, and started working with FEMA and doing a lot of this work. And then that evolved into some home elevation. It was a $350 million grant, and I spent a lot of time in that space. And I was home every single night and every single weekend. And during those several years that I was able to capitalize on that opportunity, I became a really good dad and galvanized that relationship with my son. And then as the FEMA money ran out, I got back into the industry. Due to the people with the nightclub business were opening up a new concept, hired me to kind of lead that.
It's sucking right back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that evolved into, I think, for so many of us, it's the network you have, it's the people that you know. And I had a really good friend of mine that went to Chicago to become a doctor. His dad was a podiatrist, was in year 2 or 3 of med school and dropped out, and came back, started working with us again in a nightclub business. And when Katrina hit, he stayed with Caesars Entertainment. He's now senior vice president,
That's
general manager of a property.
Very cool.
And then he pulled me back into that side of it, pulled me into that business with him. And that kind of led me to where I'm at today.
That's
Cool.
great. And same thing. Tell us about the brands that you run.
So yeah, sure. We have about 220 total locations amongst all 4 of our brands. It's BurgerFi, Savvy Sliders, Happy's Pizza, and Fat Boys Pizza. The most recent addition was BurgerFi, which we acquired in December 13th of 2023. And really, just my role is kind of just cross-pollinate across all of our brands and provide, it's just strategic architecture on the path going forward and the growth strategies. Savvy Sliders recently was by Technomics anointed the fastest growing burger chain in the country. So we have
Congratulations.
really, it was really, it was not I was in a conference and the slide came up and I was like, oh crap, like look at us, there we go. I was pulling on my phone trying to take a picture, took a picture sideways of it. But essentially, like, it was really cool. We have about 60 something locations under growth right now in that particular brand. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah. So with that, obviously we're BurgerFi franchisees, as you know. What, coming into BurgerFi, what do you guys think is like the biggest challenges and also the biggest wins that you've had since being with the brand?
Yeah, it's a mouthful. I mean, it's been 6 hard months. Really, I've said this several times, and I feel like I'm getting tired of hearing myself say it, but it's really been untangling the mess that was created, and creating more linear paths to like every part of the business. I think a really long runway that we have to galvanize is the relationship with the partners and building that trust and the equity back with the people that their livelihoods are dependent on the success of the decisions that we make. That to me is like been like a really, really big focal point of my own. And the challenges, are just the brands hit so much adversity over the past several years that like altering the trajectory of that, it's not like just 1 or 2 good ideas. There had to be a series and a calculated plan to implement like really good, successful paths. One of the things that we've recently done where we're seeing really good statistical data, I'm a Lean Six Sigma green belt, I'm analytical driven. You don't tell me anecdotal stuff. I don't care. Like, I want to see the data. And statistically, we're seeing a significant improvement in the catering segment. And that's due to some slight menu changes where we brought chicken fingers and some sliders and some different catering type options for the consumer. And we're really excited about that being a mechanism to drive increased profitability and growth for our franchise partners.
Yeah, and also in moving away from some of these companies that charge us too much commissions, from a catering standpoint, which we're happy about as well. So
absolutely,
with that, going over to another topic, one thing that, we've all seen, throughout the last couple of years is obviously we all went through COVID. It was a very tough time, throughout just the whole world, pretty much the whole world shut down. What do you guys think, I'll start with Sonny. What do you guys think are, some of the biggest challenges getting through COVID, but also some of the, biggest things that really, came out as a success story out of COVID?
And real quick to add to that, I feel like one of the things we've seen since COVID is rising costs, labor, food.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about how you're combating that as well as kind of part 2 of that question.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, COVID specifically, for us was such a awful experience, but it was kind of like one of the hardest things that we had to navigate, but it made us so much stronger on the backside because there were so many restaurants that just called it quits. Like after a few months, they called it. And like I saw chains that were coming from New York and other places, and they were planning, massive rollouts, pull the plug on everything.
Yeah, sad.
For me, the hardest part was, there was a lot of uncertainty, in the beginning, when it happened in March, April. And when your sales and your revenue plummet 75% overnight, I mean,
it's brutal.
All you can do is take it day by day. And that's what we did is, I knew at that point, you couldn't get a soul to come into your store. You couldn't get anyone, like everything was, third party and like deliveries, and everyone's talking curbside. I never even heard curbside before.
We had the days where we had to keep our front doors open and have a table blocking the front doors. They wouldn't allow anyone to come into a restaurant.
It was crazy.
What a time, man.
I think I had one crazy friend who would just still come in and like he'd eat his bowl in the corner, and I'm like, and he's, it was crazy times. But for me, I think one of the biggest challenges is like, you're navigating and running a business. And for us, we had just opened our 6th location. So for us, we coming out of a growth sprint in 2019 and then boom, right away, having that, hit was really tough for us to navigate. But it was, I think, some of the best things that happened was it did give us a little time to, instead of going 100 miles per hour in the restaurant industry, it gave us a little bit more time to reflect and actually look and peel back the layers of the onion and see where are we really vulnerable and what can we really lean into and make better. One of the things that I did during that time was I went all in on digital, and like with third party and with our website, I said, I can't control anybody coming into my doors at this moment. So you know what, let me put my energy towards something that can yield a better result. And then I've always been very like an optimistic person. I was like, I don't see this thing lasting. I was like, I don't see this, like humans cannot be contained.
Yeah.
Like we are like, no matter what, like you cannot contain humans. We will break free of it. And, living in Florida and then seeing kind of like, the government here, I was optimistic. I was like, you know what, let's actually clean up this, act and like, let's be ready to pounce when the market comes back.
For sure.
The one hard part was personnel. When COVID immediately happened, we had multiple managers quit because they were concerned about their family and they did not want to be out in the public, serving people who they could possibly bring back COVID to their family. So for us, as a young chain, having no infrastructure, having somebody in Jacksonville quit on you, someone, I had another individual up in North Florida, quit on us. It was tough to navigate because I'm like, I can't travel either.
Yeah, and you can't be in 4 different places.
Exactly.
I found that to be the toughest part. I mean, you're balancing, providing someone with the livelihood, but also helping to make sure everyone's healthy, safe. I mean, as leaders, I remember that being the toughest thing. Like, what is the right decision? No one really had the answer, I don't think.
We really like, it was just one of those things like, everyone is going up to you. If you owned a restaurant during that time, I'm sure because you can relate, they're just giving you their thoughts and prayers. Like, you died. And I'm like, they're not affected in accounting and legal and like other industries, like weren't affected really at all. But like, they're just like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I'm like, I'm getting pissed off at certain points. I'm like, you know what? I got to do something here. We got to change this. And the best part afterwards was in 2021, 2022, our stores came roaring back and COVID put an emphasis on health. It talked about why, individuals who, maybe were living certain high risk, health lifestyles were the ones that were more prone to have a lot of negative effects. So for me, having this increased surge of health awareness and people actually getting the education of nutrition and just general health, to me, it was a massive blessing for Vail because now our guests are really appreciating all the things that we do, that we cook with extra virgin olive oil. We're using and sourcing high quality ingredients. Whereas before, some of our clients cared, some of them didn't care.
Definitely. And how have you guys been managing that, with going with some of the higher, quality ingredients and
the costs?
With the costs going up, obviously food costs have gone up, labor costs have gone up, everything across the board.
I can't believe what we're paying these days. Like it's mind bending because like in 2019, you're paying like
we're paying $8 or $8 an hour. I think it was
$8 to $9 an hour,
something like that.
$8 to $9 an hour, and then like the very next year, it's like you can't get anyone to work for you less than $12-13. In like a 1 year span for a restaurant, that's really tough to navigate.
We've been seeing 60, in that 5 year span, we've seen 60 to 100% increases in labor costs.
100%,
for sure.
That's 100% accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot get a strong line cook or a strong shift lead in your restaurant south of $18 per hour.
That's true. It's very true. We're seeing the same thing in our restaurant as well.
I'm seeing you shake your head.
Come on over to you.
I'm super interested because, we're mainly in the state of Florida.
Where everything was.
Thank God, Governor DeSantis, if you're watching, thank you. So Casey, coming over to you, we the three of us have been blessed with a lot of our businesses being in the state of Florida. We have very nice government. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, if you're watching, thank you so much. what you guys are all over the country. What were the differences you experienced in different regions and challenges with
especially in Michigan and
so at that time I was still with Caesars Entertainment, so I was an executive with them. Sonny said something pissed him off during COVID, and that entire time pisses me off. I got diagnosed with cancer. I had COVID. This is no, trust me, it's a great thing. It gave me perspective, and it was one of the best things that happened to me, because it really did make me appreciate life and did treat human beings differently.
Thank God you're okay.
Yeah, because I was a real shithead before.
Yeah.
But seriously, but what was crazy to me is I live in New Orleans, and there's a casino there. There's an apocalypse. Like, the only people walking around were like the zombies and these like homeless people. You're like, holy crap. And it felt like they were everywhere because they weren't diluted by all the other people.
Yeah.
And then we had another property in Biloxi. And it was freaking Free Willy. Like, it was, and it was crazy. I would drive an hour and a half to work to go to Biloxi at that property, and it was record revenues. There was very little constraints on it. People got sick. People got sick in New Orleans as well. But there wasn't like this statistical difference in the outcome of the livelihoods of people. I think it was a severe time and impacted people's lives forever. And I take it seriously because people people died from it.
Yeah.
But like the systematic shutdown of economy and what transpired and the impact that it made, it never correlated back to me.
Yep. And
it drove me insane to be like, okay, now that I'm here, it's safe. And now that I go back home, I can't talk to anybody and I can't get food. So, for me, that time was really curious. From a counter impact of COVID that correlates back to what I see today is the pizza business blew up during COVID, absolutely took off and rocketed. And a
lot of it was because of Portnoy, with his pizza reviews. I feel like, while everyone was quarantined in their house, the only thing that they could watch was the pizza reviews.
So I mean, that took off, and that was a catalyst behind the growth of the Fat Boys Pizza brand, and then a lot of growth occurred from that. But in some ways, it was a false sense of growth, because after it kind of settled back down and people got back into normal habits, started eating healthier, everybody lean into the digital platform. Kind of pre-COVID, for the most part, if you wanted something to eat at home, you kind of were calling Domino's, Papa John's, a local pizzeria to get the food. And then post-COVID, people that had healthy options, full dining options. I could get a steak today right here for lunch. That was kind of atypical. And what happened post-COVID was actually a negative impact on the pizza business.
Definitely. Yeah. One thing I wanted to get into, because I know you mentioned before that, in 2021 and 2022, that's really where you started seeing your sales skyrocket. We saw the same thing as well in our restaurants. And one thing that I think, really correlated to that was that Florida, going back to your point, was really the only state, or, anywhere in the world that was open. You couldn't travel to Europe. You couldn't really travel around to any of the other states. So everyone was coming into Florida. Travel was absolutely insane. I mean, we were seeing it within the resorts as well. But then after, I would say 2022 going into 2023, that's where we really started seeing a dip, where 2023 and 2024 were some of the hardest years that we've had in the restaurant business to date. We've been in the business for about, 14 years now. Going over to Sonny, what did you see, going into those, 2023, 2024 years, and even coming into 2025? And one other thing I wanted to mention is, one thing that we've really been focusing on with that, is really, one thing that you always have to do is the same thing that you mentioned before with hiring, is you always have to be driving revenue. And that's something that we figured out, and that's really, where we're able to come out on the other side of this thing, where a lot of businesses, as you can see, are going into, especially restaurant brands are going into bankruptcy. Yeah. A lot of restaurants are closing down, so on and so forth. So, what have you guys seen in your restaurants?
I mean, great question. I mean, 2023, 2024, we decided, to start opening more stores. So we opened, 2 in 2023, 2 in 2024. We were so focused on outward expansion and going from 1 unit in South Florida to 5.
Yeah.
So for us, there were a lot of things that, when you're growing, your focus is on growth, not on other areas of the business, like sales growth and other KPIs that are super important. Our biggest misstep that I said to my vice president back in 2023 was, when he entered the company, there was still a lot of infrastructure we had to clean up. there were still a lot of things, personnel wise, we had to really adjust. And we did go through a really bad, I would say it was like a turnover hurricane, right? Everyone's been through it, where you just can't get a stable manager in certain markets, and it really, really gets costly. So our labor costs is what really hurt us, heavily in 2023. And, we really hammered down on our disciplines with our food costs and labor costs in 2024, but we were focused on outward growth versus inward growth. And from a sales standpoint, we grew year over year, even in 2023 and 2024. We had so much higher expectations out of 2024. And we were really, really like, not defeated at the end of the year, but we were just like, deflated, like we are so much better than that. And so we came into 2025 with this energy of, let's hold off on the outward expansion. Let's really get back to the core business. Let's really focus on, being more aggressive and just really putting the foot on the pedal on all these areas and see what is the delta of that. So, what we're seeing year to date is, most of my stores are up year to date 20%.
That's great.
And a lot of that is because of where our focus has been internally, and us really motivating our managers to also move the needle when it comes to sales growth. I always say, if anyone wants to work at my company, I'm not hiring managers. I don't want you if you could just manage a restaurant. Like, to me, like, I'm investing in people. So if I'm investing in you and you're coming on board to operate one of my restaurants, I want you to be able to showcase that you can manage and grow the restaurant, because this is the closest position to being an entrepreneur. I call it an entrepreneur. Like, you are, if you, when I was growing up, if you're a GM of a restaurant, that meant something. That really meant like, some like pride. Whereas nowadays, I feel like that has diminished a little bit. So within my own organization, we're really trying to prop up that position of really, explaining to our leaders the importance of their role at the company and how much, the success of our company relies on their efforts.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, because, in today's day and age, a lot of people, they don't really understand what it takes in order to build something, and really in order to get to a point of success or a higher level within your company or whatever it is. And that's something that we take a lot of pride in as well within our company, is really focusing on the growth and really focusing on just overall motivation, and providing a path for people where they are not only going to just have a job coming into into our company, but also where they have a career ahead of them, and they have something to look forward to. And not only that, they're able to learn stuff that they probably would have never learned before. Something we always joke around in the restaurant business, especially with us, because we're very process oriented, is if you come and work with us, we look at it as like a master's degree. We think it's better than a master's degree. We think that if you come in,
or a science,
definitely better than a science degree. It's same with my hospitality degree as well. There wasn't much that we did with that, but with that, that's definitely something that's really important. So great point there.
What about a question?
Yeah, what's up?
So what is the three of you guys' perspective on instead of the general manager role, the operating partner role, where there's profit sharing?
I think, in certain concepts, it works very well. Like Chick-fil-A, obviously, they're the number one brand in the world that really, focuses on that. I think if the incentives and everything are set up properly, then I think it works. If not, then, sometimes it can get, a little bit shaky from that standpoint. A lot of people, when they think of ownership, they think, oh, I'm going to get all this money and whatever else. But the last thing that people think about from an ownership standpoint is what they actually have to do in order to earn that. And it goes back to what I was saying before, is a lot of people don't really understand what it takes in order to build something nowadays. They think, everything comes to you, and that's kind of an issue that we see nowadays. So, with that, I think it depends on the opportunity, and what you're presenting to the overall candidate, and also, just the overall person as well, and what you think you're going to be able to get out of that person.
I was just going to say that because you brought up a point, and it really echoes with me about, you have to be with the right people, that passion and all the things that you mentioned or whatnot. If you get stuck with that wrong leader, it's painful. And I feel like it really is the same thing with an operating partner. To me, the value of an operating partner is mutual alignment. You're in bed working towards the same goals, and you have the same, aspirations, because you're mutually aligned financially, you're mutually aligned for the success of the business. You need somebody as a partner that really takes that seriously. And, I won't mention any names, but we've had operating partners that are the complete opposite. They didn't have that passion. They didn't necessarily have that drive to, to really succeed. And we're very aggressive. We're big on, we want to win. We want to put W's on the board. And I feel like when you don't have a partner that has that same passion to win, it could be very painful to that point. Painful. If you get someone that is that mentality, I think it could be one of the best things ever, because again, you're empowering, you have that mutual alignment, and everyone's rowing the boat in the same direction.
We're looking for that ownership mentality at the end of the day.